Welcome to hashtag 52 Needs, and this week we are exploring freedom. And I'm very privileged to have with me Sally Thibault, who's a transformational wellness and accountability coach, a professional speaker and counselor, an author of 3 books, an EFT practitioner and master trainer, and Facebook live show host. And I think you're also on all sorts of other different radio stations all around Australia. So you're a very expansive woman. Do you feel that you've got a lot of freedom?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, how wonderful to have the freedom to do whatever I want. So it adds that onto my CV. It's like I've done enough. It's just because I'm free to do that. That's really what it is. Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about freedom in life. So where does freedom show up? I mean, generally, we actually don't really think about freedom until we lose it. And that's become a real topic during COVID.
It sure has. You know, and I think if anything we've learnt during this time, Angela, is that our freedom, personal freedom, and freedom to make choices, last year, we experienced what that felt like not to have it on a micro scale. It really wasn't a micro scale. When you consider comparing that to what many other people have to live with, we experienced in that lockdown something we've never experienced. We were told to stay in our homes. We've never been, like, you know, no time in our lifetimes have we ever experienced that. And I think for many people, that's where they struggled last year and coming into 2021, is that I don't have the freedom at the moment to make choices like I used to. I can't jump on a plane and just fly to Europe, or my children all live overseas. I can't just jump on a plane and be in 14 hours, be with my kids. That's never happened before. In you know, everything we think about now is always sort of encouched with this, we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. And
that's really taking away our experience, our sense of personal freedom. And of course, what it does is increases this low-grade anxiety and low-grade stress. My concern about, especially all this happening now with our loss of this personal intrinsic freedom, is the long-term trauma of this. Because we've seen over the years through world wars and issues before in the past, that people actually really struggle to then find their sense of freedom again, because they're always a little bit concerned about it. And it's been an extraordinary year in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, my grandparents and my parents went through 1 or 2 world wars. And I remember my grandmother never really trusting that anything would be completely free again, and that she could move around and that she would have access to all the resources. When she passed away, I would go and there were still jars of buttons, and, you know, she was preparing to not have freedom and choice for in all sorts of different aspects.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. And, you know, we see it whenever they go into lockdown and people run out and buy toilet paper. Because it's that, and even though we go, oh, good grief, what's wrong with people? But it's that sense of, what if I don't have my freedom? And that's one thing that people have control over, is to be able to buy a basic necessity. And I don't know how many people have got hundreds of rolls of toilet paper stacked in a room somewhere, but it gives them that sense, when you step back and look at it, it gives them that sense of control at a time when they don't feel in control. And what's interesting about it is the fear narrative that runs really enhances on that. Most of us have never experienced before, that I can't just do what I want. And as you say, with your grandmother, my mother was the same. My mother was evacuated during the war. They have to leave everything behind. They ended up coming to Australia and living in poverty for most of their lives, while my grandfather was still fighting in the war, and they ended up with 9 children. And we used to joke about my mother that her fridge was always full. My mother never threw anything out. But in understanding that now as an adult, I see why that was, because they never threw anything out. You couldn't. You had to use everything. So it really impacts and permeates in so many areas of our lives, this sense of, I don't have freedom to make my own choices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And it goes beyond the individual. I mean, like, it plays a central role in social progress, right? I mean, if we can express ourselves freely, I mean, you know, full fridge, having access to hot water, being able to move around freely, say what we want to say, you know, speak what we want to say, think what we want to think. That is what contributes to us moving society forward. And when those things are falling away, and I think, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we're giving up a lot of our freedoms at the moment.
Oh, we
And
sure are.
and you know, and we are not really aware of the consequences of that.
No, I saw this video yesterday. Oh, it just broke my heart when I saw it, of these kids playing in a band in a US school, sitting in little tents, separated from the band members. And I'm looking at, my heart just broke when what are we doing to these children, where they're so terrified to have physical contact now, and they must wear masks, and you know, all these things that are taking away our innate intuitive knowledge about what keeps us safe. And I really worry about the generation coming up underneath. Yes, they'll be resilient, I get that part, but they also will be very, I believe, worried about things they shouldn't be worried about. And go on.
No.
I just think as adults, we need to understand that. You know, so many of us grew up in a time where we would leave our house at the crack of dawn to go play somewhere, and we'd come home at dinner time. Our parents had no idea where we were. None. And if we fell over and hurt ourselves, it was like, oh, well, you fell over and hurt yourself. Not who's to blame or what happened. It was just like, oh, you know, in those days it was mercurochrome and gentian violet, this purple stuff or red stuff, mum would stick on it, and a band, you know, you only allowed to have a band-aid if you were bleeding. But it was that freedom. This generation, particularly the children growing up in this time, don't have that. What will that do to their creativity? What will that do to their just general sense of, I can be who I want to be? I think we will see the outcome of this in years to come and think, what have we done? What have we done?
Well, this is the time as a teenager where you look forward to the future. You look at all the options. You look at all the choices that you've got, the explorations you're going to make. This is the time where teenagers bump against each other, where they learn how to define each other, themselves, by peer pressure and resisting or going along, exploring all sorts of things parents will probably not agree with. And now they're stuck at home. The only thing they can do is play games online with people they may or may not connect with if the internet's not working. And, you know, and there's just that's not freedom.
No, not at all. And, you know, you've got a great point there. I think, you know, what happens, you know, I used to work in the education system, and we would worry about helicopter parents. We'd see it all the time, where these parents would just hover over the children. And, you know, I was in the education system long enough to see kids go through the system, come back out again. And I saw and have seen in the 10, 11 years now since I've left the education system, because many of the kids I've kept in contact with on Facebook, obviously, the ones who had really great freedom, whose parents stepped back and let them make mistakes, are way better off than the kids whose parents had to make everything perfect and would fight their battles. So then we look at now, we've got a helicopter government hanging over the top of us, as well as then, helicopter. And it's like, how will all of us, and I think this is where it's really important that this theme that you've got about freedom, I think this is a really important point to ask ourselves, is how can I maintain my personal freedom in this time of what we're going through right now, or whatever we want to call it? What does freedom actually mean to me, and how can I adapt to that? Because it's really important if you're living with this low-grade anxiety, because that's what happens. If you watch that's why people love to watch the news, because cortisol levels rise. which is the flight, fight, and freeze response. And we all know what to do in that time. We're going to fight something. We're going to run. Like that's an old, back from the claw and fang jungle days. We knew what to do when we were stressed. When we're stuck, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So it's like I had a young client yesterday, and I kept saying to him, stop saying I don't know what to do. Reframe that question to, what do I need to do right now? Yeah. What brings me joy? What brings me that sense of freedom? And I was in the context, he had 2 job offers, and he was trying to make a decision which one would. So, and he kept saying, I don't know what to do. I said, yes, you do know what to do, because when you get silent, when you get quiet, and you align with the values, what are your important values? And I think for many people, freedom would be number 1 at the moment because of the pullback. Freedom, security. Although when we pull back from that and ask ourselves what's really valuable, then your brain goes seeking ways to make that happen. Yeah. Whether that's, you know what, I can actually get up and go for a walk out in the bush. That's what I can do right now.
But see, it's at the moment, I think it's really hard for people, and especially for young people, to know what they can and cannot do, because it's been so overwhelming. We've been restricted in our economic freedom. We're starting to be restricted in our informational freedom. I mean, if you look at what's been happening with Facebook and Google lately, definitely our freedom to act. And then ideological freedom, like, what are we supposed to believe? Like, I mean, are we supposed to believe that Corona is something, that we really need to fight nail and tooth? Or is it something where everybody goes, ooh, it's a conspiracy? There's a whole bandwidth of all of these things, and nobody is really clear on where this is going and how this is going to play out. And I can imagine that for somebody who is, as a teenager or as a young person, is A, flooded with hormones, B, like really doesn't know where the social support is coming from anymore, doesn't really know how to express that or discuss that with people. This could be really, really overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. And we're seeing it in the high rates of suicide amongst teenagers in the US in particular. I don't think the figures in Australia have been released, but I know they have been in the US, and it's shocking because these children feel that they have no way out. That's terrible. When we've created a hysterical society, and I think what you were just saying, whether it's conspiracy theory or it's truth, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. And I think our role as adults in this is to be the way showers. We have to lead the way as adults. And that's what I always think comes back to questioning yourself. What can I do right now?
Yeah. But it's not by holding an umbrella or being a helicopter parent and protecting people. No. It's about saying, go out. I mean, yes, there are limitations right now, but go out and make use of whatever opportunities you have, because there are still lots of opportunities out there.
Of course there are. And that's what happens when you move into fear. You could, your ability to see things goes like that. It's like, move the blinkers that way.
Yeah.
There is still fresh air. There's still plenty of running water. It's like I agree with you. I think I'm really concerned, I must admit, that our young people are being impacted by this way more than the threat of this pandemic. I think the trauma, the ongoing trauma, the implications on mental health will be felt for many years to come.
Yeah.
And that's critical. I think we need to look at that really. But as the adult, if you have children at home, as you just said, get them outside, let them go. What can you do right now? I know you can't do that. But what can you do? I know my son is in Montreal, and they've been in very big lockdown there. They're still on stage 4. They also have curfew, and they've been like that since way before Christmas. And we had a chat, and I said, well, what can you do? And he said, well, I've always wanted to write a book. And that's what he's done. He's now writing a screenplay. So it's like, I can't, and then yesterday it stopped snowing for the first time week. So he got on his bike, went for a bike ride. Like it's like grabbing those moments and asking yourself, what can I do?
Yeah.
And I just one more thing. You have to remember, we're still sovereign beings. We still have freedom of choice about how we view things.
Yes.
And getting caught up in the things that we can't do takes away that sense of empowerment.
And that's a topic we're both really passionate about. It's the ability to have emotional freedom. So you got emotional freedom, I've got emotional productivity, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's the ability to say, I can choose to feel differently.
Yes.
Instead of going, and I'm doing this, I'm a victim here.
Yes.
Which is really easy to do because life is tough. And I know I've had my plum moments, my poor little old me, you know, like everything's just tragic.
Yes.
But it's the ability to say, it sucks. I'm feeling what I'm feeling right now. And now I'm going to move myself out of it. It's onward and upward.
That's exactly right. And that's so true. I mean, we had plans to move to Canada at the end of April. And we've been gearing for that for 6 months to be with our kids. We sort of made the decision 6 months ago, this is rubbish. We're going to go live with them. And then they've shut the borders now quite harshly, and their restrictions quite. And I did the same. I walked around for a week going, woe is me. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute. Okay. I'm not saying I can never go. What can I do in the meantime? And so it was really that ability, as you just said, move out of victimhood into sovereignty. And okay, how can I make the best of this? We're not going. We're just we're not going when I think I should have. And I'm a great believer in timing. Everything's about timing anyway.
Yeah.
But it was, I allowed myself to be sad for a week. And I think that's really important. It's really important to feel the emotion.
Absolutely.
And, you know, as I said, in the work that I do with emotional freedom, it's like, feel the emotion, find out what's triggering it. What's the trigger? And, you know, for me, it was, you know, things like not being told I can't do things that didn't make any sense when I was growing up, all that type of thing. So it was releasing the emotional connection to that. And then coming back to, I am a sovereign being. I'll make the best of this situation. And perhaps right now wasn't the time to go. Okay, next. And away we go. So it's like you said, it's like, you're not a victim in this. If you're a victim, your vibration lowers.
Yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of businesses are really hurting right now. And that's really hard for many families, many people. Who knows what's going to happen in the next few months. But you know, I've been through that. We've been through the loss of a business, loss of house, loss of, you know, all our money, all that stuff. And it was hard, but you come out of it if you ask the right questions. A very different person than when you were in it. And it's all about recognizing you're a sovereign being, you're independent, you have the freedom to make choice. We still have free will. And
Absolutely.
Feeling that emotion, but not letting it overwhelm you. It's really key.
And I think the important thing is to remember that we also have the freedom to surround ourselves with people who will support us in that, or people who will actually dissuade us from, you know, stepping out of victim role.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier, you know, as they say, misery loves company.
Absolutely.
It just means you might have to make some tough choices.
Yeah, and I think that's going on a lot now. You know, I remember back in March 2020, I did a show and I said, I think this thing's going to divide people. And it certainly has. Right down the middle, it's just dividing. You know, people that you thought like you don't, rightly or wrongly, and people I didn't think like me do. And I'm like, it's like you've made this whole new set of friends and acquaintances, and letting go of people who pull your energy down, who get trapped in the victimhood and like, I'm not going to go there. That's just right now. That's too hard. I can't bolster you up while I'm trying to keep myself sovereign.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's freedom, isn't it? Though, isn't it? Freedom to make those choices.
Yeah. Well, from everything that we've talked about, I think the important thing is to recognize that, again, we've got all sorts of freedoms, but we can get sucked into the victimhood. And this is another topic that you're really, really, you're an expert in. And I just want to touch on that briefly. But during lockdown, I know I put on a lot of weight. Thankfully, that's all gone again. But, you know, the freedom to eat whatever I want, that was during lockdown, became, I have the freedom to stuff my face and really just go for it.
Yeah. So, and that's exactly what happened to everybody. because when you're in low-grade anxiety and low-grade stress, the body's cortisol levels are risen, and your body goes searching for things that are going to help you feel better. And for most of it, it's foods that give us the serotonin hit, which is carbohydrate, sugar, and that was the body's way of helping you cope with that stress. And so that's why people gained weight. It wasn't actually the food, but it was a way of, well, the outcome was the food, but it was the body's way to calm this physiological response. And that's why so many people carrying what we call visceral fat, and why it's so important to let that go.
Yes. So it's really important to recognize when we're medicating, and it doesn't necessarily have to be food. It could be anything. It could be alcohol. It could be gambling. It could be playing online, shopping. It could be even compulsive meditating.
Exactly.
Anything could become an addiction as long as we feel that we don't have the freedom to have choice.
That's exactly right. That's an ancient reptilian brain response. Is I'm going to do something that makes me feel better for the instance. You know, when we talk about things like addiction to pornography, for instance, in this time, a lot of people that's rising. It's that instant gratification. That's what that all, and it's like, instead of looking at it, any form of addiction, whether that's food, alcohol, gambling, games, it's coming back and saying, what's going on for me? What is it I need right now to calm and soothe this? And, you know, what's really interesting about this is I used to teach intuitive eating, and I recognized that through 2020, that's what people were intuitively doing, was reaching for high carbohydrate, high sugar foods. So that whole thing had to change. And that's why I teach what's called conscious eating right now, which is, you know, creating intention, yes, intuition, but also looking at some knowledge about what you're doing, and then identifying, being introspective about it, and identifying what's driving the choices, and then implementation. You know, I'm a great believer in, if you've got a strong vision about what you want, and we come back to that freedom thing, I've got a strong vision about that, that can overpower anything. It can overpower restriction. I think it's far more powerful to create a strong vision around what you want, and know that this will pass. You know, you were talking about your grandparents, your grandmother before. That war was awful, but it passed. And it's like, we can't get caught up with things. Well, it really bothers me when people keep saying a new normal. No. Well, it depends on what you're talking about a new normal, because the masks and social distancing is not a new normal and never will be.
No.
That should never be. But perhaps a new normal about the way we view what's important to us.
Exactly. And if we want to really embrace freedom, we have to be conscious of the choices that we're making, and we have to be conscious of the freedoms of the freedom aspects that we have in various, you know, or the freedom that we have in various aspects of our lives, so that we can then stand up for this and say, you know, this is what I'm, you know, as you said, when you're a sovereign being. And I think more than ever, we need to be able to do that, because we fought for more than 100 years. We fought long and hard for having freedoms that we didn't have before.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. Okay. Well, that would be a great place to close. Everybody, please look at what freedoms you have, which ones you take for granted, which ones you're giving away, and which ones can you actually relish and expand, even though you think you may not have any choice, because there's more freedom than we think there is, always. We just have to stand up for it and just be the sovereign beings that Sally talked about. Thank you so much, Sally. It's been wonderful to see you. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me, Angela.